Hey guys, Coach LZGlowz here. In today's lesson, we will learn about angles, how to hold and peek them, and what common angles are. By the end of this workout, you will have an understanding of how to use angles to properly gauge in fights and have an impact on the match. I also would recommend checking out Fight to Fright after this lesson to get some ideas on how and when angle knowledge can be used to win fights. Let's warm up with a deathmatch game. When you die, note how many times your crosshair was off from your opponent. Was it when you were moving, or were you holding an angle? Was the opponent somewhere where people usually are? Were you able to see them when they killed you? These are all important questions to ask. For this lesson, we will answer how good or poor you play angles. The idea of angles simply means any 2 points on the map that can see each other through one line of sight. That being said, angles can either be held or peeked. Holding an angle means staying out at one spot, consistently staring at the other point, waiting and anticipating for the enemy to come from that angle. Peeking an angle means moving into the line of sight from one angle point and then aiming at the other point in hopes the enemy player is there. So holding an angle waits for an enemy to come into the angle's line of sight, where peeking an angle is putting yourself in the angle's line of sight. You're almost peeking into the angle. Both peeking and holding angles have advantages and disadvantages, especially when playing Valorant online. The advantage of holding an angle is that it's relatively easier mechanically. Since all you're doing for the most part when holding an angle is reacting to someone coming into your line of sight and shooting, you don't have to worry too much about actively aiming or even moving. With these advantages, it may seem like peeking angles is disadvantageous. Not only do you need to actively aim, but when peeking an angle, you're almost peeking multiple different angles when finding which angle the enemy players are holding. But peeking does have some advantages which people argue beats angle holding advantages. The first one is the ability to manipulate the spot you will shoot from when peeking. When peeking an angle, you almost always know where the holder will be holding from, so you already know where you will need to put your crosshair. But the holder has to aim where they think you will peek the angle, stop, and shoot from. Typically, holders will think you'll peek close from your angle in which they will place their crosshair close to the angle they are holding. So when peeking, if you overswing the enemy's crosshair, you are now the one that just needs to stop, react, and shoot, whereas a holder now needs to aim and readjust their crosshair to a moving target. This is done by doing something called wide swinging, which means swinging or peeking wide from your angle. The disadvantages with wide swinging is that you may expose yourself to multiple angles, give your opponent time to react to your swing, and it may make it hard to get back behind cover. Again, wide swinging is good to counter someone holding an angle, but the holder can react or change their crosshair placement to account for it. So wide swinging should be used as a mix-up alongside the traditional close peek. Peekers also see holders slightly faster than holders see peekers, at least online, due to how servers work with data. This is called peeker's advantage and is why sometimes it looks like the person that killed you instantly killed you when they peek. The degree of peeker's advantage increases the more ping disparity there is. How you place your crosshair or how you aim when peeking and holding angles is simple but important. When peeking an angle, unless you know where everyone else on the enemy team is or short on time, you should never try and pre-aim an angle. This is because you will neglect the other angles you will be exposed to, so if you don't clear them as well, you may get caught by someone holding an off angle. The opposite occurs from holding an angle. Due to peeker's advantage, if you have cover, it's not a bad idea to strafe in and out of cover when holding an angle. When doing this, it's okay to pre-aim the angle or not change your aim. This is because it allows you to be the most accurate when coming out of cover, and you know there cannot be someone at the other angles from the time you went into and out of cover. The only time you would want to fully clear when coming out of cover is when you went behind cover for a long time and gave up the angle. This is because you will be now in a position where you're now peeking the angle rather than holding it. The last thing that affects angles is the distance from cover. When there's a piece of cover between two angle points, the angle point that is closer to cover will first be seen when peeking or being peeked, which can get them killed. So generally, you should try your best to be far away from cover when peeking or holding an angle. The exception to this rule is when peeking from an angle. Sometimes peeking the furthest away from cover will limit the distance you can swing, making it so that you can't wide swing. Additionally, changing the distance you swing from cover will change your head height for those holding a low ground angle. Though you most likely will take damage, it can give you the ability to kill the holder, whereas an optimal peek could have gotten you killed. Peekers having the ability to know where people will be holding from, have peeker's advantage, and able to mix up where they will be shooting from, may make holding angles look very disadvantageous. This is where holding different types of angles is very important. The two primary types of angles are common angles and off angles. Common angles, as the name suggests, refers to any angles that players commonly hold. The reason these angles are common to hold is because they provide safety, usually in the form of cover, while giving line of sight to a key part of the map. This will give you important map control by either giving enemy location information if the enemy comes into your angle's view, and or by fighting the enemies that peek your angle. Being able to successfully win fights from people peeking your angle not only allows you to maintain control of the 2 angle points, or your map control, but also gives your team numbers advantage. Examples of common angles are any angle between the site entrances and coverage on site, and angles between areas of top mid and bottom mid. So as you might have guessed, many common angles or many times you'll be holding a common angle will be when you're playing on defense or defensive. By default, many players on defense will be holding common angles from site, where attackers will have to peek them from the main entrance. But the role of holding and peeking can quickly shift if the holder retreated behind cover and the peekers now have them pinned. Defenders also may choose to peek in and out of cover from their common angle rather than holding it, in order to take advantage of peekers' advantage. Off angles really refer to anything that are not common angles. There are many subcategories of off angles like wide angles, one and done angles, right angles, etc. But these will be covered in a different video. Now that we understand how to peek and hold angles, let's play deathmatch. Try staying still at certain spots around the map, hold certain areas or angles, and try killing anyone that peeks the angle. Try using commonly used angles that you've seen people hold in your game. Mix it up by moving around and fully clearing everything when peeking an angle to fight someone, and try not pre-aiming when peeking. After this, play one swift play and try holding main from common onside angles when defending, and try clearing all angles when peeking when attacking. With that, we have covered the basics on how to peek and hold angles. It should be noted that the types of angles that people use as common angles will come natural to you the more you play. So keep in mind the types of angles you see your teammates and the enemy team use, and take notes of how safe and how much map control they give. You then can use what you learned from this lesson to properly implement them and have an impact on the match. I'm Coach LZGlowz. I hope this video helped you out, and I'll see you in the next one.